We're joined by Orioles right-handed pitching prospect Chayce McDermott, who's obviously in the middle of spring training, but coming off of a ridiculously good year and a really strong finish. Really excited to talk about it with you, Chayce. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So let's just start with what's going on right now. Obviously, you threw a bunch last year, finished strong in AAA, and I'm excited to talk about some of the trends that we saw towards the end of the year, from pitch usage to just filling up the zone more and all of that good stuff. But how did you kind of carry that momentum into spring training here? And how do you, as a pitcher that threw a fair amount of innings, try to keep that momentum going, but also let your body rejuvenate and get going into spring training?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is I think a lot of guys can agree with me. If you're throwing well at the end of the year, especially that like break is much needed kind of when going into the off season. But at the same time, you're like, man, I don't want to stop throwing. Like I want to keep going. So it's kind of hard to like roll into it and just be like, oh, well, last year's separate kind of thing, even though that's what it is. So doing that is kind of hard sometimes, but yeah, I mean, kind of rolling with it this year. It's really just been a mentality thing. It's not getting too deep, like not trying to be perfect with everything. Kind of trying to stay simple with a bunch of stuff and using that to my advantage.
So you've got 3 years in a row, I think. 21, you combine your college and your pro numbers, you were over 100 innings. And then you were at, 103 in 2022, and then you were about 120 this year. So what did that look like from October until, beginning of February when you do get to camp in Sarasota? How long was the shutdown? And I mean, you're 94 to 96 right now, so you're obviously feeling fresh and good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of everyone's different too. You'll see some guys that'll take a week or two off, and then you'll see some guys that don't even pick up a ball really in, like December. And somehow I'm not one of those guys. I can't do that. But for me, normally a couple weeks, and then kind of roll right back into it with some light throwing, just get into a progression. I normally do the Orioles program they give us. I think it fits for how I throw and stuff. So it's pretty simple for us.
How's the Orioles program kind of been for you now going into your third year with Baltimore, being that, you've just seen this progression. Obviously, you had the stuff and you came out throwing really well and Houston, and that's why you were part of a big league trade. It's obviously there was a lot of interest in you. But now with the third year, obviously the Orioles have just continued to get better and better with their development. We know that what they can do on the hitting side, but it seems like things on the pitching side have just continue to get stronger, and you're seeing a lot more arms develop now since you've gotten there. What has it been like? You talk about using that program and following it. Have you sensed a tangible change in the way that the Orioles have been developing arms in the last few years?
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, our hitters are so good that I think our pitchers kind of get overlooked sometimes because yeah, I mean, you got Jackson and Kobe and Heston and Basayo and all them. Like, it's kind of hard to be like, oh yeah, the pitching's pretty good too sometimes, but they're so good. It's just kind of on a different level. But I think a lot of our progressions, I mean, if you look at some of the numbers, I can't give you exact things, but I'll see numbers come up and it's like stuff plus whatever it is. And we always seem to be in the top at least 10 in those. So I think there's definitely what we're doing is working. But I think a lot of things is using the numbers, but in a human aspect too. So if you're trying to get a sweeper and you're trying to get that 20 inches of horizontal break, which would make it a elite pitch, you're not going to go from throwing a 5-inch slider to a 20-inch slider most of the time. So kind of being able to go through it and kind of pick and choose what works for you and what doesn't, and then find a way to get to that 20 is a big thing that we do.
I was going to ask you the hypothetical. Put yourself against the Norfolk Tides lineup from last year to start. How are you faring? Like, what's the line score there?
That's a running joke. We always talk about how we don't want to face our own hitters. I think I would do all right, but I think once they figure me out, then we're gonna have to change the game plan of some sort, and then because I mean Connor Norby in the offseason, we always joke because Connor Norby leading off is the best home run hitter I've ever seen. It's a home run, it seems like every time he leads off. So I threw against him in the right when we got here in the spring in some live at bats. And I threw him a fastball and he hit it. And I was like, man, maybe I just didn't get it up enough and all this stuff. And then we go back and it's literally at his eyes at like 96 and he just crushed it. Like, there's nothing you can do at that point. That's just good hitting right there. So,
I was going to ask you that. Like, of course, Jackson, given his age and what he's already done, is the top prospect in baseball. But in terms of maybe matchup, and you do some live ABs, that's stuff that's always so much fun to sneak and go watch on the backfield. But who do you think would be the most difficult guy for you out of that Norfolk Tide group to get out? Would it be Norby, or based on matchup, is there somebody else that you think could give you a little bit more fits?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be Norby. For some reason, Norby has my number. So he seems to get the better of me quite a bit. But I mean, that's the thing too, is I'm saying this. Other guys have definitely gotten hits. I've walked guys. Like, I'm not just like beating up on the other people. Like, they're all kind of. It's a tough battle every time. But Norby just seems like I said. I can't. I threw a fastball at his eyes at 96, and he still crushed it. So that's kind of hard to be like, he's not that good. So
Hey, before we get into the pitch by pitch, kind of Arsenal breakdown, I do have two questions that kind of precede your pro career. Number one, you're from, I guess, central Indiana, right? East central Indiana. Who did you grow up wanting to throw like?
uh, it's kind of funny, obviously being right-handed, but Clayton Kershaw was the one that I always tried to emulate. I even had to like pause in high school for a little bit. But yeah, Clayton Kershaw was always the one that I was trying to be like growing up.
Nice. And then you get to a place like Ball State, and a lot of people don't know the pitching factory that Ball State has turned into. I'm lucky. I've worked with Ball State for the last 4 years, but I mean, recent memory off the dome. You got a Zach Plesac, you got a Dre Jameson, Kyle Nicholas, who I saw in Indy this year, who's with the Pirates. I mean, dude, even a guy like with Trenner O'Donnell, who just went to the White Sox, or was that Houston?
Red Sox.
Red Sox. And then you got Ryan Brown, who is striking out the world, and he's with the Dodgers now. What has made that place this good at producing pro pitching?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things that go into it. I think the program's really well run. Maloney does a great job every year. But I think we've had some great pitching coaches. Feder is now the Tigers big league pitching coach, is actually who recruited me to Ball State. He ended up leaving before I got there, though. So I got Dustin Glant, who ended up becoming a pitching coach with the Yankees. And then when he left, I had Larry Scully, who's now the pitching coach at Miami of Ohio. Great pitching coach. And then you have Justin Wexler, who threw in the minor leagues and was a fourth round pick out of Ball State, has been a scout with the White Sox for a while. So, I mean, you're kind of just running. It's not, as some schools, it seems like you kind of get pitching coaches that played a little bit here and there, but like there, you're getting guys that really know what they're doing. But I think on the flip side of that too, it's the instruction you're getting from other guys. Like you were talking about Trey Jameson, Kyle Nicholas. We're all in the same recruiting class, so it's coming in and Trey's throwing 100 and Kyle's throwing 100. For me, I'm like, okay, if I'm throwing 90, like I'm not gonna pitch. So I had to kind of like figure some stuff out. And then I bet you could talk to them about it too, but they would probably say that they were trying to outdo each other every time they went out that freshman and sophomore year. So then I think that was kind of the thing that with Trenner coming in, I mean, we even had a John Baker, who was the active Division I strikeout leader my senior year. Luke Jackson was really good that year. And then we have Trenner being our Sunday guy. So again, it's kind of, we're pulling him along going like, we're not losing on Sunday. So like, you better find a way to do it. That just kind of helped each other and stuff like that. So, and then we also had a great catcher, Chayce McDermott, who's actually our AA. I don't want to say the wrong title. I'm going to say he's a AA coach of some sort. I don't want to, I know the titles are all, but the fundamentals coach, I think that's what it is. So, but he was our catcher the whole time, and he's super smart. So it helped a lot having him too.
It's an awesome group over there. And was it the 2020 season that you guys still had a good core there as well, or were most guys kind of gone by then?
Yeah, I mean, 2020 we had our three guys that we were throwing out there were John Baker, who again was the active Division I strikeout leader that last year, with I think he had over 400 or some crazy number. And then Kyle was our Saturday guy, and then I was our Sunday guy. So
is that a bit of a what if for you? Like just kind of wondering like what could have happened if you guys had that full season?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to kind of look at it with how short the season was, and we actually probably weren't playing as well as we should have been. But I mean, I think you look at that rotation, and you kind of go, man, I think we could have done something special, but kind of tough. Everyone probably had the same thought, so we'll just leave it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I wanted to ask you about the progression of last season, specifically when you get to AAA, where there was a trend mostly across minor league baseball, which was if you got to AAA, a lot of pitchers would tend to see their walk rates inflate. For you have to pitch with the system going here and there, and then also it's just a tighter zone and more disciplined hitters as well. But you were an exception to that. You end up filling up the zone even more in AAA and cutting that walk rate down and continuing to get good results. What was it for you in terms of being able to manage the ABS, being able to manage more disciplined hitters, but beyond that, actually filling up the zone more at the highest level that you've played at so far?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it was the biggest thing was I think throughout minors, low A, high A, and double A, I was kind of trying to get chased on a lot of pitches, try to get strikeouts. And then I got to triple A, and you have an automatic zone. You're not going to get that extra inch or whatever that some umpires are going to give you. So I was kind of I walked 6 guys, I think, in one outing, and our pitching coach came up and was just like, you got to throw it in zone. Like, if they hit it, they hit it, but we got to be in zone. We can't walk 6 guys here. And then the next game I went out, I think I walked 1 guy maybe, but I had more strikeouts in that game. And I was like, oh, okay, like even in zone, this stuff's flying pretty well. Then kind of rolled with that, kind of having to be in zone with the ABS and then going, hey, these guys aren't really hitting me as hard as I thought I would in zone. Was kind of a nice like confidence boost for me, just going, hey, just throw it in zone. They hit it, but you'll get the next guy. So
do you have to force yourself to think differently about your fastball when you do think, okay, I'm going to beat guys in zone? Like, obviously you want to work around the perimeter of the zone. You want to work in thirds. Did you almost have to force yourself to think, okay, I can go attack mode with my fastball because my fastball is really good?
yeah, I mean, and like I said, double A, the zone was higher, so I could throw up a lot, and guys would they're kind of guessing if it's going to be called a strike or not sometimes, and it obviously just plays up better in the zone. So I was really, and then I get to triple A, and I'm just like, okay, I got to be able to move it here, move it there. And then when I kind of started doing that and realized that guys weren't really hitting it as much as you kind of expect them to with the end zone, it was kind of just like attack people with fastballs. Then if they adjust to it, then use something else. But until they adjust to it, just keep throwing it. So
Yeah. When did you realize that you have a pretty unique fastball and because you mentioned just kind of realizing, oh, hey, I can fill up the zone more and get whiffs, and you've been an above average in zone whiff guy with the fastball for multiple years now, but especially doing it now in AAA. But above average carry if you look at induced vertical break. But the other aspect of it that I think is unique is that you have a pretty flat vertical approach angle there too. Are those all things that you started to pick up later and said, oh, wow, I'm good at this and good at that? Or are those things that you ended up developing? Because I've noticed a lot of pitchers end up, from TrackMan realizing things that they do well that they had really no idea of, just the byproduct of it. And then maybe there's some others that say, oh, I'm towing the line of doing this well. And the feedback allows them to push across and end up doing it proficiently.
yeah, I mean, I think personally, kind of in college, kind of realized that the fastball played a little bit better than some people's would. And then so I kind of was just throwing it. And then I got drafted by the Astros. And that was like one of the first things they said was like, hey, the fastball really plays. And then looking at the TrackMan data, like you said and stuff, it was like, hey, like if they can be above here, like if you can be above 18 inches on average, like it's a pretty good fastball, especially with the approach angle and all that kind of stuff. So from there, it was kind of just, hey, like work on the spin a little bit more, make sure it averages 18 or above, which is kind of differs. I mean, baseballs and stuff, the AAA ball is a little bit different with the big league ball than the AA ball is a little bit easier to spin and stuff like that. Then kind of figuring it out from there, going, hey, like get it above 18, stay above 18, let it rip and stay in the zone with it. It's kind of helped.
So aside from boiling Coke on a stove, and that's like Coca-Cola, I should have been more specific with that. What's a way that you can actually work on spin in terms of like, there's little things in terms of just being able to get the ball to rip off your fingers, but that's another thing that I feel like comes very natural to most guys. How do you work on spinning the baseball better for a fastball for those who may not like totally understand that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. The two that I've done is a little bit more extreme, I guess, but you get like a rod of some sort and just through the middle of a baseball, have somebody hold it and you just put your fingers on it and just rip through it. So
Whoa.
yeah, just rip through it. It just helps you stay on top and feel that kind of pull through. I don't think that's utilized enough for some people. It's probably not even thought about enough. but use that in Houston when I was there. So that was a big thing. And then another thing is just taking like a rubber band or a bracelet or something and putting it around the middle of the baseball. So for four seam, just through the middle, and then tracing the outsides of it and coloring it in. And then if you throw it, you should see a solid line on that, just called a line ball. And that's kind of an easy way to see if you're spinning it efficiently, because that's the biggest thing. You can spin, some people could spin a fastball probably at 2,500, but if it's all wobbly, it's not getting the right spin efficiency, it's not going to stay as true. So if you can get, the closer you can get to 100 with the spin efficiency, which is a huge part of the line ball, is just seeing that you can spin it repeatedly and figure out. It's like sometimes I'll go out and throw the line ball and stuff, and it'll be kind of like this word, like spin to the side. And then it's like, okay, my hand's on the side of the ball today. Like, let's get it back on top. It's an easy way to make adjustments because you can see it as it's happening. You don't have to go back and look at the video.
I love those MacGyver exercises. Those are great. And then you kind of, okay, so say you do have a day where it's kind of flying off to the left, right, and you have that diagonal angle. Are you at the point now where you can almost feel that, even if you're not throwing with a line ball, where it's like, yeah, I'm off right now. Let me try and mentally correct over the course of a game. Say during a spring training outing, you feel a fastball feels weird. Okay, I got to get back on top of the next one.
Yeah, you can definitely feel it. It takes time, obviously, but once you get to a point, like now I can feel it because it normally means my arm's a little bit late and kind of pushing my hands out and getting late with the arm. So I can see it. It normally goes up an arm side. So if I see that, it normally means the same thing. But it's also sometimes I'll throw it and you can just tell it kind of runs more, and that's because the side spin will push it that way. Or it's even nice having catchers too that like you can obviously communicate with without them telling you stuff. So like throw Maverick Hanley in AAA last year for us, so would put his glove down, and it just meant, hey, it's like spinning down like a sinker almost, like get back on top of it. So there's little ways, but you can definitely start to feel it once you get kind of. That's the thing is using that line ball, you'll start to feel the differences, and then you start to feel it in game as well.
So I want to kind of just ask you to walk us through your arsenal, because you have a litany of secondaries and there's been some malleability to it as well. I know you've kind of ditched the older changeup for more of a split grip, which I'm excited to talk about. But also with tracking systems, sometimes they'll just tag pitches a little bit differently. And something I noticed with you as the season progressed, we started to see more cutters. Is that where those mistagged? I mean, looking at shape, it looks like distinct cutters, but is that something that you started to mix in down the stretch of the year? And then how did that kind of work with your slider? Because I'm looking at just even the last couple starts, based on TrackMan, it was a pretty even split of sliders and cutters from you. Yeah, which is pretty rare to see when, that was a pitch that maybe you weren't throwing much at all earlier in the year, or was it just the system not maybe tagging it properly?
Yeah, so I was throwing it, but it's kind of a long story to explain, but I threw the cutter was my slider in college. And then when I got into pro ball, same thing. I kept it for a while. And then about halfway through the year, I want to say in 22, yeah, like right before I got traded, started working on a sweeper. Last year it became more use of the sweeper. The sweeper is a better pitch. So use the sweeper. And then my cutter was kind of blending in with the sweeper. So then we kind of went into it, reworked it and everything. And then, so as the year kind of went on, you kind of saw where it drifted back up and the velo went up a little bit on it, and made kind of a separation pitch. But now it's kind of like we worked on a little bit more. It's getting a little bit more distinct, the difference in them. I think I've been throwing it. Last year I was throwing the cutter, which is obviously supposed to be a harder pitch. I still call it a slider. It's two separate sliders technically, but like last year I think I was throwing on average like 84 maybe, and then in spring training so far I've been throwing at like 86 on average, so a little bit more velo, kind of a little bit more separation, a little bit more hop with it. So it's becoming more distinct pitches now that they're kind of, I can separate them.
So did you get away from the sweeper entirely? Because through spring training right now I see slider, cutter, curveball.
Yeah, so the sweeper's still in there. Still throwing that. That seems to be best graded pitch for me right now. It seems to work when it's where it needs to be. But the cutter is using that old slider, which it kind of is weird, but that was my best command pitch when I was in high A for a while, was that short slider. So we never really wanted to get away from it, being that I could throw it in zone a lot. And then last year when it kind of started to blend in with the sweeper, it became less of a strike pitch. So now it's trying to separate them a little bit more. So you use the sweeper, use the cutter, and then throw both of them in zone, command them a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a frustrating thing with some of the pitch tagging too. Is like sometimes now it tags it as a slider, sometimes it tags it as a sweeper. But when you look at the shape, especially the way you were throwing it down the stretch, I mean, 15 and 0 pretty much is going to be a sweeper every single day of the week. So that pitch obviously works mostly against righties, and traditionally, lefties are going to perform better, or just opposite-handed hitters are going to perform better against sweepers. So do you feel like that cutter is a better option for you against lefties? And or is the curveball a pitch that you prefer against lefties? I know that the splitter is probably the best option, but of the spin, which is the one that you kind of prefer to go to against lefties? Because you did kind of have an even mix for the most part, but with the curveball kind of leading the way.
Yeah, the curveball is definitely probably the most used pitch to lefties in the sense of like the bigger off-speed pitches. Obviously, with the splitter and stuff, I'm kind of using it more to righties now too, but that was a majority of lefty pitch last year. But that's the thing is we've been kind of mixing all of it in. I haven't really used the sweeper as much, but in live ABs, I was throwing everything in any count just to kind of get a feel of everything.
I'm sure the hitters love that.
Yeah, they were not too happy with some of them, but the sweeper was kind of actually better than it was playing better than it should have according to like statistics and all that kind of stuff. So that may be a pitch I'll mix in occasionally, but yeah, it's definitely more the curveball cutter to lefties. But now that I'm saying this, if anyone sees this, I'm going to throw a ton of sweepers.
The old lefty sweeper. How much fun was using that split grip? Was kind of working with that and perfecting it? Because the viral pitch edition of the offseason was Bryce Miller adding that splitter, and he seemed to have a ton of fun learning it. I'm curious where your level of fun was learning that split grip as it kind of transformed.
Yeah, so I was throwing a changeup, and it was just not good. It was not a good pitch, and I could not figure it out. And then this was going into last season, like what I guess like January 2023, like a month before I showed up for camp, and I was still throwing the changeup, couldn't figure it out. And Brian Hoeing, who's actually on the jumbo shrimp up and down with the Marlins, he trains at the same place, and he was throwing a splitter, and he was throwing them one day, and they were like cutting a little bit, but it was gross. Like it was like -4 inches, like a vertical break, and like -3 of horizontal break, and then he would throw the next one and be like -2, and then +12, and we were all messing around with him, like joking with him, like, oh, I don't know how to throw my cutter, and then I was throwing to a guy, and I threw one, and he was like, dude, that's better than your changeup. Like you try to throw that. So then ended up I threw it in my next pen just kind of like to see what would happen. Got some numbers on it on the track, man, and I sent it to Forrest, who was the AA coach at the time. And he was like, yeah, let's roll with that. And that kind of went. And then
That's great.
Yeah. It's funny how pitches develop sometimes, but it was funny. It was fun too. Cause like I would go out there and it's like, I'm just throwing a fastball at this thing too. And I hold it extremely weird compared to a lot of guys, how they throw their splitters. I'm holding like a 4-seam grip with just my fingers spread out and throwing it. And like, it's doing basically what it needs to do. And then it kind of became frustrating when I needed to use in game. Sometimes it was inconsistent. So then it was kind of not as fun. And then now getting to work within the off season, throw out more and have better, like more command and more comfortability with it has been fun.
And yeah, it's funny because pitches like that, it's almost hard to, I mean, you can see the data components and things like that, but when you're still trying to find that consistent feel for it, it's kind of hard to know how good it is, right? Because opponents, you threw 158 of them roughly, like 160 of them last year, and opponents hit $130, but you didn't maybe throw it as much as you probably wanted to down the stretch because you like you mentioned, you have the curveball that plays, you have the fastball, you had all these other options. So how do you juggle that? You're focusing on development, of course. The goal is to become the most complete pitcher you can be, but at the same time, you're close to the big leagues. You've got other pitches that are really good. You can go out there and compete without the splitter, but also the splitter could be what ends up putting you over the top at the highest level. How do you balance the development side and then still wanting to go out there, compete, and get out, especially on a Norfolk team that ends up going and winning it all? And I'm sure that was a blast in Vegas. Like, how do you balance the development side and the competitive side?
Yeah, it's hard sometimes because, like you said, it may be the pitch that ends up being like the pitch for me at certain points. So you really got to work on it. But at the same time, it's like, oh, I got this guy 0-2 in the sixth inning. I haven't given up a run or whatever. It's like, I really wanted to shut this down right now, but it may be a time to throw a splitter. And so then it's kind of like, oh, well, do I really trust it and all this stuff? So it's kind of being able to go, okay, I need to trust it because I need to develop it. But at the same time, like, worst comes to worst, we're winning 5-0 right now. He hits a solo home run, we roll with it. I get the next guy out and keep going. But it's kind of hard sometimes to go, worst comes to worst, I give up a run because obviously as a pitcher, I never want to give up a run or a hit ever. So it's kind of hard sometimes to go, we'll throw my fifth best pitch here and see if we can get an out. So
Yeah.
it's definitely an interesting. For me, it's the competitiveness takes over, and then I get in the dugout and they're like, "Hey, you should have thrown a splitter there," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but like, I throw fastball."
Yeah.
So, like, it's a hard transition. So
Yeah. I know just like this timeline for you is probably one where, I don't know if you're feeling pressure, but like it is one of those high stress environments, right? Where you are in AAA, you're knocking on the door of what you've been aiming for your entire life. You're in big league spring, you're throwing really well in big league spring. Where are you at mentally in terms of like, when you leave the ballpark, are you putting baseball away, or is it, hey, watching stuff back? Are you a guy that wants to be encapsulated by the game the entirety of the time that you're in Sarasota? Where's your mind from like you get up to you go to bed when you're in big league spring?
yeah, so like when I get up, it's immediately baseball, like making sure everything is ready for the day and all that kind of stuff, and make sure I feel all right and everything like that. Um, Once I get to the field, obviously everything's go. Like you're doing what you got to do, watching the games, all that kind of stuff, figuring out, talking to coaches. But for me, normally when I get back, it depends kind of on if it was the day I threw or the day after I threw. I normally am going over a little bit of video, trying to figure some stuff out. Uh, Most of the time when I get back, like I say, I'm trying to put baseball aside, but I'm looking at my phone every once in a while, and there's baseball clips everywhere, and I'm watching people throw and how guys did and friends did and all that. But I try to kind of separate it a little bit. I try to enjoy the time with my wife. I have my dog here and stuff like that, so I kind of try to relax. I mean, I say that we're at the field from normally like today. I think I was there from like 7 to 3:30 or what that. So I'm there for a long time. And I'm there, I'm looking at stuff all the time while I'm there and working out all that stuff. So I do kind of like to try to come home and just hang out and relax. I love baseball. Baseball has been probably one of the most constant things in my life since I was a kid. But at the same time, like it is a game. It is supposed to be fun. So I try to make it as fun as possible. I try not to put too much pressure on myself in a lot of situations.
What kind
I'd
of
imagine.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jack.
Real quick, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Shih Tzu poodle mix. That I think. Oh,
Yeah, that question always gets precedent. Sorry, that I should have let you roll there. But I was going to say it's pretty easy to have fun when you're dicing through a big league lineup, and that's exactly what you did a couple days ago against the Toronto Blue Jays. I just wanted to ask you what was working for you there. Clearly, it was the fastball where you threw 19 fastballs, 16 of them were strikes, but just overpowering guys. It was 3 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 6 Ks, 45 pitches, 30 strikes. What were you feeling there? Talk about fastball confidence. You clearly had that, but you also mixed in the cutter, and I noticed that the cutter was getting you ground balls. I know it's a small sample, and you've historically been a fly ball guy. Is that something that you think may be a factor for you, maybe getting more ground balls in weak contact, or was it just kind of the way things were working for you yesterday where you were having some success both at the bottom and top of the zone?
yeah, I mean, with the cutter, I think that's a big thing is sometimes we get too deep into counts trying to get strikeouts and stuff like that. And we've talked about it. Hey, if I'm in the 5th inning, I'm at 65 pitches, 70 pitches. I need to try to get through 7. So we may have to go, hey, let's get a cutter here real quick or whatever and try to get a quick ground ball. So that has been kind of a topic of conversation, that using the splitter as kind of a ground ball pitch. It got a decent amount of ground balls last year and stuff like that. So using that, but also, like you said, the fastball is feeling good. I was commanding it really well compared to the outing before that against the Phillies. I was having a lot of problems where I was leaving an arm side in that game, so that was a huge focus in my bullpen that following week. We just, hey, command that glove side, stay there, and it really worked through the game. So that was kind of a everything felt good, body felt on time, so we were kind of just using what we had and rolling with it.
Chayce, last one from me. Next couple of starts that you make in spring, kind of through spring training, and then, first couple of starts in the regular season, wherever that may be, what are you looking to really hone in on? Is there any, major goal that's at the top of your priority list? I got to do this for the next 5 times I'm out on the mound in a game setting.
Yeah, it's just the timing. Like I just said, if my body gets off time, that's when the command normally starts to go a little bit. We've gotten into a really good place with it this past week and a half, I should say, where it's been consistent timing, handbrakes on time. When the handbrakes on time, everything works a lot better. Like I think my slider or my sweeper averaged like an extra 2 inches last week compared to last year. The cutter was much sharper. The curveball had good depth. The fastball was really playing end zone. So kind of figuring out that timing and staying through that is a big thing this year. If that sticks all year, it should be a pretty good year command wise. I'm not saying it'll be a good year, but command wise compared to the past, it'll be a good one.
Nice.
And does that tie in with the breaking balls in terms of it's the same thing, right? Like when the breaking balls aren't there, but the fastball is, like, is it usually just the same cues, or do you have different cues for different pitches maybe not being there, since it is a different throw, but maybe it's the same mechanical, thing that can go awry for you?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the game and stuff like that. But like some days I'll be throwing 4 of my 5 pitches really well, but the sweeper won't be working. But it may just be because I'm pulling left side, which means I'm normally probably open my shoulder a little bit early, or just the line's off. Everything's good, but for some reason the line's off. So trying to kind of understand that. But yeah, like you said, the days where the fastball's playing well, sometimes it doesn't even mean the body's still on time. Like I was just talking about, it just means I'm able to get the fastball through the zone a little bit more. But sometimes that means trying to find that timing again on the other pitches and then using it for the fastball as well. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But the biggest adjustment is just figuring out what the issue is, one pitch at a time, not trying to fix everything all at one time kind of thing.
Last one from me is an opportunity to maybe gas up one of your organization mates. We've had Cade Povich on the show, so I'm going to remove him as an option answer wise here. But who's a pitcher that you feel like, and you talked about it in the front end, some guys need some more shine because these hitters are taking all the damn sun and overshadowing everybody. There's some talented arms that are really intriguing. I'm really pumped to see Seth Johnson throw this year and be healthy and ready to go. But is there anybody that you think pitching wise it deserves a little bit more shine and attention in this Orioles organization?
I mean, I could go through about 50 people, but I'm trying to think of somebody. I mean, Alex Pham last year, if you look at the stats, came in, was a 19th round pick, was a reliever, and then they moved him to a starter, and he absolutely dominated all year. I think that's one guy that really needs to kind of get a look more than he has. Justin Armbruster had a great year last year. Garrett Stallings is really good. I mean, like I said, I'd go through a bunch, but the one person I was really impressed with and I got to watch a pitch to was Seth Johnson. We threw it in Baltimore in the offseason at one point together. I'd never seen him throw. We got traded together, obviously, in the same trade, but I'd never even met him until this offseason. Yeah. So I met him for the first time, and then I was like, obviously, I knew he was top prospect, high pick, all that stuff. I never seen him throw, and he threw the first pitch, and it looked like he didn't even try to throw, and it was like 95. And I was like, oh, like, yeah, this is exciting. So I'm really excited to see him pitch this year too. Like I said, I keep going through. I mean, Carlos Tavera, I think will be a good guy to watch this year. I keep going through a bunch of names, but Trace Bright, same thing. Really good last year. Again, I can keep going, but I mean, those are just some of the guys at the top end, I would say, that are really dominating right now, and I think really have a chance to break out this year.
I've got one more. I lied. Were you confused where you were going on August 1st, 2022? Yeah. That was a confusing ass trade, man.
The only reason I even knew was because of the phone call that I got, obviously telling me going to the Orioles. But at first, I mean, also Twitter is probably a baseball player's worst enemy sometimes, because I'm sitting sent tweets from random people that I don't even know, and they're DMing me, and it's like McDermott to the Nationals, McDermott to this team, and I'm like, oh, like, where am I going? And then that wasn't even official yet, and then I get the call and find out I'm going to the Orioles, and then I'm looking at it and it's like, wait, am I going to the Orioles or the Rays or where am I going? But luckily, I kind of got it figured out. Talked to Adam and everything, my agent, and he was like, "Hey, you're going to the Orioles. Like, I'll get it all set up and everything." But yeah, it was definitely a confusing day for about an hour and a half there.
Yeah. You could stump a lot of people on that trade still, I think. Like, I think they know the gist of it, but they have no idea. Like, they couldn't put it all together, even if you gave them like a multiple choice, like sorting opportunity. It was a confusing one, but it ended up putting you in a location here where you're knocking on the door, and also it's a franchise that I think is heading in a really good direction for obvious reasons. That's going to be good for a long time. So I imagine you got to be really pumped about where this organization is and to be a part of that.
Oh yeah, it's super exciting. I mean, today we show up and I think we scored 8 runs in the first 2 innings, and then you have to on the mound. It looks like I think was the first half WHIP leader last year, and yeah, I mean, it's hard to look at it and go, we're not the best team in baseball right now. Like I know that's probably a bold thing to say, but at the same time, I don't think it is. I mean, you got Gunnar, you got Adley, you got Jackson, Kobe Mayo, all these guys that are probably on a lot of other teams are already up.
Oh yeah.
But hard to break through this lineup right now while everyone's playing. So I think it's tough, but I mean, I think we're a really good team, especially with adding Corbin Burns this year. Emerald, I mean, you got a bunch of veteran guys now that are really going to help out. I say veteran. Corbin's still pretty young for like 6 years, but you got them, and then you got guys like Kyle Bradish, who obviously had an amazing year last year. You got John Means, who's coming back this year. Dean Kramer, all these guys, I mean, are just going to be a really interesting team to see. And then we'll get Felix back next year, too. And that'll be another scary thing for people to see. So,
For sure. I'm really excited. And I'm pumped to see you be a part of that exciting staff too, man. Continued success. I'm excited to see what you're going to do this year. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.